Hello, I hope you guys are having a good spring break. I know that this is in the middle of spring break. This is an online class. I doubt anybody's going to be on the call here, so everybody can watch this later at their leisure after they um, come back from their revelries during spring break. What I wanted to do tonight is go over. We have several people that have turned in their carvings, and some of them look really, really good, and some of them look like they have just a little bit more work that needs to be done on them before they're finished. And there are three more things that we're going to do. Well, actually, two more things that we're going to do with these before the end of the term. One is cover them with paper mache, and we'll talk about that next time we get together. And then the last thing before the end of the semester is we are going to add color and texture to these, and that will lead us into the next module, or that will be, excuse me, after we do the next module, which is on color and texture. And we will talk about that a lot more in depth on Wednesday. Um, the last project module is one on contemporary practices, and that's when we will talk about different kinds of contemporary art, specifically wrapping and um, conceptual art. And to get ready for that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and I'm going to have a link to that in this week's attendance. And I would like you to watch this thing, say 5 things about it, and then to get your full points for attendance, watch the Allegory of the Cave video that I will link and say one thing about that as well. We also have several of the PowerPoint presentations that have been turned in, and I wanted to mention one of the service projects that people have been working on, the service learning. Actually, no, I think with the service learning, I'll mention that and we'll talk more about that next week. If that's all right. It was uh, rather exciting what the students have been doing with the service learning projects. So before we get into everything else, I wanted to talk a little bit about Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And this is something that we need to be mindful of as artists. And as we go forward, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. This is something we need to be mindful of artists. I want to also recap the 4 tools of artistic critique, because that's what we'll be needing later on too, because people need to start doing their peer and self-critiques soon. And we'll talk more about that next week. And these are important as we move forward because the last couple projects, one, the color and um, texture project is one where we just explore colors and textures. But the last one, we're dealing with ideas about art that are not standard things that people have been talking about as their own issues for a long time. Conceptual work that um, where the art itself is perhaps less important than people's reactions to it, is something that there's an element of it in everything that we do, but that is something that specifically started rearing its head as its own art medium or art format or art genre in the late 50s, early 60s in the US. With the idea being that everything else we've been working on, the tools that we have and the materials that we have, like the tools are like the tape gun or the knives or the files or the sandpaper, and the materials are the cardboard or the sticks or the plastic or the foam. All those have been used to create a final object, and the object is its own discrete thing. With conceptual art, and this is something that I wanted to address now because for some people it takes a little bit of time to, I don't want to say buy into these ideas, but really kind of appreciate what other people are doing with these ideas. Um, with conceptual art, you are using that final object as the tool and as the material. And the final product you're making as a conceptual artist are the ideas, specifically that people have in response to that object. That object becomes the tool, and the ideas that you generate in their mind through that tool becomes the art. That's why it's called conceptual, because it is something that requires itself to take place inside the viewer's imagination. Now, in the video, it's only the Allegory of the Cave video that I want you to watch is 4.5 minutes long, is all. What I really like about this video is it's a very clear and concise summation of Plato's Allegory of the Cave. In this, Plato describes a group of people that are chained up with their backs to a low wall, and all they can see their entire lives is the dim light of being inside of a cave. And the only activity that they have is essentially watching the shadows that are cast in front of them from a fire that is behind them on this other side of this low wall that their backs are to. So if you can imagine people living their entire lives in a cave, sitting down with their back against a low wall that just comes up to right above their head, and they're chained there so they can't really move their head or anything, and all they see are people behind the shadows of the people behind them from the light that's cast by a fire on the wall ahead of them. All they see is shadows their whole life. And Plato then says, what if one of those prisoners, their chains were broken and they were forced out of the cave? This is all they've known. They've never had an idea that anything else exists other than this cave. And suddenly, their world expands exponentially. They see that there were things casting shadows. They see that there was a light source, the fire. And more than that, they see the outside world. Plato says at first, they're looking around, they can hardly see anything at all because it's so much brighter than what they've lived their whole life being used to. And they're confronted with ideas like color and their three-dimensional form, that they can move around stuff. And at some point, as their eyes are adjusting to everything, they can see that maybe there's a correlation between these objects and some of the shadows that they saw. And they can see a tree for real, for example, or a plant for real. And you can imagine their shock and surprise when it dawns on them that they're seeing that the thing they see look back at them from the still water is their own reflection. And after a while, they realize that the sun is the actual source of all the light that they're experiencing. And you can imagine how this would completely explode their entire worldview. And then Plato says, what if the person is so excited to experience all this, actually meeting other people, talking to people, experiencing animals, tasting things that they never tasted before, realizing all these ideas about a source of light and reflection and color. What if they come back to the cave and try to convince the people that are still chained up of what they've seen? Saying things like, what you see are just the shadows of these real objects, and I've seen the real objects. What you've seen as light is only fire, and that is a dim, dim reflection of the actual source of light, which is the sun. And the things that you see are movement, are just the shadows of movement. You're not seeing the actual objects themselves or the actual people that are carrying these things so that you can see the shadows. And if you can imagine Plato saying, the prisoners are going to think that this guy is a crazy person, because not only are they completely disrupting their worldview, everything that they know is real. They are this prisoner who came back is giving him all sorts of information that just doesn't make any sense. I know that shadow on the wall is the actual object. I don't know what you're talking about. What's casting the shadow? How can it even be a shadow? That's the actual object. This is the brightest it's ever been in my entire life. How can there be anything that's brighter? How can there be a different source of light? What does that even mean? There's only one source of light, and that's what I see cast from behind me. And that, and in Plato's allegory, this person is completely ignored because everybody knows they are totally insane. And Plato used that allegory to explain the frustration of somebody who has embraced, for example, enlightenment, trying to come back and tell ordinary people what that enlightenment is like. And I do like Wassily Kandinsky in his Spirituality and Art, or The Spiritual and Art. It's an excellent book. It's a Dover publication. I recommend you read it if you're able to get a hold of a copy from the library. What Wassily Kandinsky talks about is that the artist has the role of a prophet, and they can't help it. It's not something that is they are called to, and it's not something that anybody elects them to. It's just part of the process of being an artist. Now, what does this mean? Well, there's two different things, very specific roles that Wassily Kandinsky talks about. One is it's the artist is the person who is essentially critiquing society. And it doesn't have to be a bad critique or it doesn't have to be a good critique. It is just the artist is sharing what they see that they've experienced around them, what they think about it. Well, it doesn't matter whether or not that's, a good perspective or a bad perspective. It doesn't matter. It's the artist's perspective. And because the artists process information differently than most people, what we do is create stuff that addresses these kinds of things, that talks about these kinds of things in a way that is not bound by normal language. And so the artist is being self-referentially critiquing of the society that they live within without standing on a pulpit and telling people this is good and this is bad, but just by the mere process of creating something that allows other people to see what's inside the artist's brain. And the other aspect of that two-pronged prophetic role is, Wassily Kandinsky talks about, is artists potentially can get people to think about future consequences of the good or the bad that they're experiencing. And it's less about I'm warning you and a lot more about let's think these things through. Let's follow this line of reasoning through. Let's if this is what's going on now, this is what it could potentially mean, and this is what could be happening in the future. And those two roles for artists are not ever linear. The moment that it becomes linear, if you do this, then that, it starts shifting away from art and into propaganda. Because an artist's role is not to tell people what to think, but it's to share what we're experiencing in a way that communicates an awareness of an expanded worldview to other people around them, not to tell people what to think. And so I really love those two kinds of ideas. Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and he, of course, was, I think there is a not so subtle hint that he was saying that he was himself enlightened. And, people that spend an awful lot of time and energy thinking, I believe that we can give that to them, that it's okay for them to believe that they've been enlightened. But that also explains, I think, all of us in this class, that explains what you guys are doing as artists. This is what's going on. You've seen something beyond what other people have seen. And then Wassily Kandinsky, in his book Spirituality and Art, talks about coming back, the artist's responsibility of coming back from our imaginal realms and sharing what we've seen to other people. Now, again, you're not telling people what to think. The best art is something that was going to completely change every time somebody comes back to it, and it's going to be completely different for every viewer, because as an artist, you are inviting potential viewers to kind of join with you and help you create the ultimate meaning for your work. And the reason why it's going to change, good art is always going to change is for the viewer whenever they come back, is because the new person that they are, the next time they see that art, is going to respond and think about it a little bit differently. And the way that they respond and think about that art a little bit differently is going to then in turn inform them in becoming the newer person when they come back to the art later on. I I don't want to burden you with the glorious purpose, like in what was it, in Thor, Thor 2. But that is something that, as artists, that's one of the things we do. And it's not a role that you take on. It's not a hat that you're given. It's just what you do because your role is to create, and that's what you're driven to do. Like what Brian Kershiznik talks about, an artist doesn't do stuff because they think, oh, let's try that, so much as an artist does stuff because something ruptures inside of them and it has to come out. And I really like that. Anyways, that's one of the reasons why I want you to watch that video. So again, you watch the video and record one of the things that you learn from that video. And then for the rest of the attendance assignment, we're just going to go through, and I think I said earlier, mention 5 things about the video. Just mention 4 things that you learned in this video, and then the one from the Plato's Allegory of the Cave. Right. I really want to get to watch all the PowerPoints that have come in, and I think that that will take us about a half an hour. So I'm going to go through these objects that have been turned in pretty quickly, and we'll talk about each of them. And I think what I was really impressed with is that, pardon me, these all turned out really good. I'm very impressed. I think they're all beautiful. Some of them might need a little bit of touch up, but I think they all turned out really, really well. We talked about biomorphic abstraction. We've talked about not keeping any of the uh, original flat surfaces of that block. And this person did an exceptional job of doing that. There is none of those original surfaces, and this is very organic and biomorphic. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is that I do believe this needs to be a little bit smoother. And if the chattering right here is just a result of the sandpaper, I know some people got smoother sandpaper than others, then there's not much you can do about that. But I'm looking at areas like this, where the tool marks are quite a bit deeper. And I'm thinking that this person, I would like to see them at least try a little bit to sand that down a little bit more, see if they can get that just a little bit smoother. Now, we'll see an example in just a minute of where that's really smooth. But all in all, this person has done an exceptional job. I love that it looks, I can see things like bones, hip bones, things like that in this. And I love how some of the areas are really smooth and flowing. Others have a little bit, like right across here, there's a little bit of a harshness to it, but it feels like it's all intentional. It doesn't feel like it's been done halfway and then left alone. And I think it turned out really good. My only concern is this chattering right there. And so this person, if I do mark it down because it needs to be smoother, and you then go back and try as much as you can, but you still have some of that chattering, just leave a note when you resubmit and let me know. I think this is another really good example. My only one concern I have about here is this little triangle right there that we can see from the photo in the upper left. And the easiest way to do that is just to resubmit this by cropping that out of this. I think for the most part, this is looking really good, but I do believe that, like right through here, I think this is an excellent shape. This kind of almost fan type thing on the left-hand side. And on the right, I like these nubs, but I do think that this would benefit from a little bit more sanding and smoothing right through here, just so that the shape flows a little bit more organically. And but I think that this is looking really good. This, I think, is ready to go. This is great because it's very organic. It reminds me a lot of that Hans Arp, Hans Arp. Um, and I think that it's a relatively simple form, but the person has done a really good job of sanding it down and making it feel very organic and very abstract. So that turned out really well as well. And I love this shape. I think that this is a great shape. Um, it does concern me that feels like it's a little bit on just one plane. And I'm thinking that one way to do that might be to sand some of the areas down a little bit. So maybe this is a little bit flatter or something. Maybe this looks a little bit more, sand it down on the right-hand side so that this nub that comes out feels more like a rounded ball or something. And I would just play around, if I was this person, I would just play around with those ideas a little bit. But I think that this is turning out really good. It still feels, like I said, it does feel a little bit flat, a little bit silhouette-y. And maybe the way to take care of that would be like on this left-hand fin, sand it down a little bit where my arrow is, and make it almost like a scoop going that way. I don't know, but there are, and then maybe sanding down the far side of this so that it feels like this curve is coming, where the point is coming towards us a little bit. And if we sand the farthest part away, right where that point is, and sand the area that's closest to us on this elbow right here or the shoulder right here on the right, then that will help to feel like it has a different orientation than the flat planar space that it's occupying right now. But I think this is looking really good too. I think this is a really good start. It looks very similar to the one I did, except for the one I did, this bulbous part was at right angles to it. I think this is really good, but again, we're dealing with a very planar type space. The photography is absolutely beautiful. And I would like this person to go back through and look at it, see if they can like sand this area right down here, maybe a little bit, so that it feels like this is coming towards us, and maybe sand the right hand part down a bit so that it looks like that part is going away from us. I think that could look really very cool. And then from the top, it would have this kind of S curve and it wouldn't look so flat. I think this is a really fun start. I think that this is one of those things where um, I think this does need to have more sanding done so it's smoother. Because you do see the chatter of the tools, and you see some of the where the foam has been dug away. I would use the smaller grit sandpaper that's in there. And this is one of those things where maybe sanding inside of these um, bulbs on towards the top on either side, maybe sanding inside a little bit so that these look like how the outside of the ear kind of is a little bit thicker than the part that's thinner right inside of it. Um, Maybe that would help. But again, this is one of the ones where it feels just a little bit too much like it's on a plane, and I think there might be some ways to deal with that. Maybe one of them would be as simple as on this right-hand side, maybe sand the area inside down towards the hole so that it isn't predictable, but it seems to almost kind of flow and disappear into the hole. But there's a couple different things that can be experimented with so it doesn't feel like it's been pressed out of a single plane. That gets us back to that. So that's a couple different things about those, but I think for the most part, those turned out really well. So I hope that for the others, you guys get them done so we can see them from you on this next coming Wednesday. Now it does give us plenty of time to look at the videos that have been turned in, and let's see, I want, let's see, I'm trying to get to a point where I can show this to you. Okay, I see. All right. Hold on just a second. Let me get this here for you. And what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're just going to go through and see each of the artist PowerPoints that have been turned in so far. And then at the end of it, I'll talk about them. Okay, here we go. Going to turn this off. And see, I hope everybody can watch this. Turn the volume down a little bit so your ears aren't blasted. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so the artist that I have chosen is Dohusa, and he is a South Korean contemporary artist. And he is known for the installation and sculptures. And he explores themes of home, memory, and identity, and lives and works internationally. So the themes that he explores while making these beautiful architectural sculptures are memory and personal history, migration and displacement, and architecture and space. So in his work, De Hosa recreates a life-size hallway using very thin translucent fabric, and the structure looks like pretty much architecture, but instead of solid walls, it's made from soft textile that you can see through. Okay, so like I was saying, the materials that he uses are translucent fabric. So the entire structure is carefully sewn together using fabric and almost like constructing clothing or textile objects. And the details include doors, light switches, and architectural elements, and to replicate the spaces that the artist once lived in. Like, for example, bathroom, the tub of the shower, pretty much everything, a kitchen, like a stove, and the counters, and all of that. So it really is beautiful. It's a beautiful work because it represents the memories and the places that he have lived in. For example, one of his first work of art was the house that he lived in when he was a child in Korea. And it just was absolutely beautiful. So, okay, let's keep going. One of the most renowned artworks of his repertoire is the one called Sum One. And this is sculpture. It's made out of thousands of military dog tags, like that you can see right here. So the sculpture appears like an armor from distance, one of the ones that are Asian traditional costumes, and it represents the relationship between an individual and a group. So he explores right here the identity and collective experience, and he has many artworks with exactly the same theme that he explores as well, the identity and collective experience. His work resonates with me because he works with the textiles and different construction techniques. So, but I work with apparel, with fabrics as well, but for the apparel industry. And I also communicate ideas, and he also communicates ideas. And we also, both of our work connect material and personal story, because in my case, most of my clients, the apparel that they are basically designing and that I product developed and produce have a lot of intention with their own experiences as a human being. For example, in different sports, ski, and different areas. And Dohusa explores these personal stories with the drawing memory into his work. And so it's very beautiful to think that there are some connections between him and me. He's an immigrant and he has lived in different countries, and so all of his work are representations and replicas of places that he have lived in, or things that he has been in contact with. So it's a really, really beautiful. So Saw also often explores this theme of migration as well, like I was saying, in memory, because, like I said, he has lived in different areas in countries. So it's interesting how he chooses this thin and lightweight fabrics instead of thick and other patterns, or fabrics with patterns. So it's really interesting that all of his work is translucent, and so it's almost like an experience where you can see through. It's almost like a similarity with, you can see through your past, and it's just beautiful, very emotional and very fragile at the same time, which and might be part of his own memories, which it's what it is. Memories are fragile, right? So it has a lot of meaning. Okay, so these are my sources, and thank you.
What I really like about what this person did is we got to see several examples of Dohosa work. And they talked quite a bit about what he is doing with his artwork. And I really like that. And um, because this person has extensive experience in working with fabric themselves, it makes a lot of sense that they gravitate towards his Dohosa's fabric work. And I love how they talked about this, about talking about identity and belonging and stuff. I really enjoyed this one too because the person who presented all this information really made this personal, and they talked with evident excitement and um, just admiration for this artist's work. So I think overall this is really excellent. Um, Now, some people who have turned these in the past, when they do this last slide, I asked you to have your sources. And the sources are supposed to be in MLA format in alphabetical order, just like the in your bibliography, but without the annotations. And if you are one of the few who did the sources like this, I don't want you to redo your video because I think this person did an excellent job on the video. What you just need to do to get the last few points on the assignment, and I will clarify that when I grade your assignment, is just put these in the correct MLA format in alphabetical order with all and with the accessed on date afterwards. You just put that in a separate document and then resubmit with both your video file and that, so that we have a permanent record of it in Canvas. But all in all, this person did an exceptional job. I think this is a really good example of the artist PowerPoint. Let's see. All right, that's not what I wanted. Okay. We're going to show this tab instead. And we're going to go right on with the next one that we're looking at, which is myelin. Okay.
Alex Cheng.
I'm sorry, I missed the first things. Hold on a sec. There we go.
Myelin by Alex Cheng. Maya Lin was born in 1959 and raised in a small town in Ohio. Her parents immigrated to the U.S. from China before she was born. Her father was in academics before he left China, then started ceramics after he got to the U.S. Lynn was always interested in learning anything she could. Her mother wanted her children to go into something that challenged them intellectually. Lynn's family was more focused on intellectual success rather than career or money, which is different from a lot of Chinese families. Lynn spent a lot of time creating art with her father and eventually realized she was more like him than she had thought. In college, she began studying architecture, but realized she was spending more of her time on her art, so she chose to combine them both. She has created many works in her life that all have a different influence on her and other people as well. Maya Lin went to Yale and created the Vietnam Memorial for a class project. Her design was a black V-shaped wall that would be engraved with the names of the soldiers. She later decided to enter it into the design competition for the memorial. She didn't think that she would win. The contest was anonymous, and she thinks that if people had known her age, that she was a girl, and that she was Chinese, she might not have won. After Lin ended up winning, she faced a lot of criticism for her design. Many people didn't like it, and her name was kept out of the dedication. After Yale, Lin continued to create many more works all over the nation rather than be discouraged by the criticism of the memorial. There is a documentary about her, and she wrote a book. Maya Lin combines art and architecture in her work and pursued a career in both. She makes large site-specific works as well as smaller studio works. Her work encourages people to think of a bigger picture and be more aware of the world around them. She completed her work, Ghost Forest, in the same year as her husband's death. She created Ghost Forest to show the importance of preserving and restoring habitats. When we do work on preserving habitats, we help preserve biodiversity. The environment is very important to Lynn and one of the main focuses of her art. She also tries to explore how we relate to landscapes. There are several places where her art has been featured. She has had many projects as well. Her art has been in many galleries and museums. She has learned a lot about topographies and geography while pursuing her art. Many of her large projects come from the request of nonprofit organizations. I really like that she cares about the environment and works with nonprofit organizations. Maya Lin has an interest in rivers, and it inspired her series of rivers. She made them to try and help people see the river as a whole instead of just the little part that they are aware of. Lynn thinks that art is a very important way of expressing ourselves. When beginning a work, Lynn starts by writing about it. She writes about her goals for the pieces. She also studies and researches before she starts a piece. Her main focus in her work is the environment. It is something that has been important to her for a very long time. She wants to use her art to help bring awareness and create change. Maya Lin has many works in her exhibition, A Study of Water. She has always been inspired by waves and water. She thinks that being aware of more than just what is right around you is important. Some of her works are focused on wave patterns, and others on the glaciers and how the ice is melting. She is very concerned and fascinated by the ice melting and global warming. She also has works focused on lakes and rivers. She makes rivers out of marbles. They cover the walls or the floor of the places they are made for. She also likes to use silver for water. Lynn also has a project called What is Missing. It focuses on teaching about what will be lost if we don't change, as well as what we can do to change.
I think this is another really, really, really good example of the artist PowerPoint. I love how precise this individual was, how articulate they are. But it's nice to know a little bit about the artist so you kind of see where they're coming from, then learn about their focus. And like the Vietnam War Memorial, I didn't realize how problematic it was for some people. I thought it's a relatively simple design, and I have seen and spoken with several veterans who had profound experiences with something so simple. They thought it was just wonderful because it felt, I've heard from many veterans that it felt like this was more for them and their memories than it was to please a crowd of people. But I think it's very interesting how relatively simple the design is. And I really appreciate how this person also shows the diversity of the different kinds of things that Maya Lin does and creates. So we have the Ghost Forest, and then this is more from Maya Lin's River series. I like how this person talks about the different kinds of things that she does, dealing with the environment, but from the environment from an artist perspective. It sounds like it really informs what they're making it. So I thought that this individual did a great job in presenting this PowerPoint about Maya Lin. Nicely done. Okay, and here's the next one. All right, here we go.
James Turrell, Master of Light. Turrell's beginnings. Turrell dropped his graduate studies in 1965 after he produced some of his first light sculptures using gases to create flames that burned in different colors. Realizing that this was what he wanted to focus on instead, he decided to postpone his studies. 1 year after, Turrell rented his first studio space in California, where he began to work with high-intensity projectors as a light source, creating From Proto, the first of his projection pieces. This was the nail in the coffin that made Turrell decide to pursue his craft rather than his studies. Mastering light. Light is one of the most important things in our lives. We wouldn't exist without it, despite us never really thinking of it that way. Turrell's work allows us to connect with that important part of our lives. Turrell's piece, The Color Inside, is located in the University of Texas. Viewers walk into a cylinder structure with no paint, no decoration, just a perfectly cut circle directed at the sky. It frames the sky in such a way that it makes us feel closer to it, and that can mean both physically and emotionally. At certain times of day, the brightness of the sky changes the color of the cylinder room. We don't realize the beauty of light in our daily lives because we use it constantly, so Turrell uses architecture to frame the beauty of light for us. Quaker roots. Turrell identifies as a Quaker, a religious society of friends who worship by gathering in silence as a collective waiting on God. Despite his Quaker roots, Turrell has yet to confirm about whether or not his artwork was religious-based, often explaining his work in general terms so a wider audience could understand. Turrell's series of sky spaces consists of white interior spaces with a row of benches mounted to the walls, which are aesthetics of traditional Quaker meeting houses. Directly referencing his religion through his art speaks to Turrell's religious roots, but it is also enjoyable to wider audiences who have no connection to the religion. Just like me. I didn't grow up religious, nor am I religious today, but James Turrell is one of my favorite artists. I feel a strong connection to his art despite having no connection to any religion. The Gansfeld effect. Turrell studied and applied the Gansfeld effect to his art. The Gansfeld effect is a perception phenomenon when being exposed to uniform or featureless sensory field. When the brain is deprived of structured sensory, it begins to hallucinate, which is why we feel uneasy in an empty room with no furniture or windows. Turrell, however, takes this uneasy feeling and replaces it with curious bliss. Into the Light, Perfectly Clear. Into the Light is an art exhibit created by James Turrell at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. It directly takes what James Turrell has studied about the Ganzfeld effect and applies it into a gallery's worth of artwork. In his most famous piece, Perfectly Clear, the viewer is subjected to an array of changing colors: rose, magenta, turquoise, and so on. There are no other subjects, nothing physical to observe, just an empty room with interchanging light that envelopes the viewer. Once being presented with an award at the Gala in Boston, Turrell describes his art inspiration. When I first started out, I reduced the light levels of many of the pieces, because when light is reduced, then your pupil opens. Aten Rain. Turrell's installation in the Guggenheim Museum, Aten Rain, is built with a series of cones that proceed through the space starting about 25 feet above the floor and proceed almost all the way to the top of the space it occupies. Between the viewer and the daylight, rings of LED fixtures surround the empty space and are directed upwards, casting slowly changing colored light. Like most of Turrell's work, this piece is meant to create a meditative atmosphere for its viewers, as if they are stepping into a calming painting. Rodin Crater. You know that friend who's been working on their thesis forever, saying they're going to finish it, but never does? For me, the Rodin Crater is kind of like that. James Turrell jokes about his largest project that's been taking him nearly 50 years to work on. A sky observatory nestled in an extinct volcano outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, called the Rodin Crater. Turrell acquired the rights to build in the crater in 1977. Since then, it has been completely transformed into a work-in-progress art gallery, including luminous tunnels and galleries that open to the sky and are decorated in light. The project was started in 1977 and was set to open in 2024, but has yet to be completed and remains closed. Today, Turrell works daily with his architects and visits the crater almost every day. Framing light. Turrell speaks of light having strong purpose in art. It can depict a scene or an emotion, but it is never the subject of the painting. Turrell uses light as the material to affect perception, orienting of what perception really is, rather than the object of perception, because he creates art with no image. Without image, without object, without specific focus, what do you have left? You have light.
I think this is another really excellent.
Produced some of his first light sculptures.
Sorry, there we go. This is another really excellent one because the person went through and they just really give you a solid understanding of James Turrell and what his work was. And when I was at OSU a while ago, they had at the University Gallery, they had one of his pieces, and it was just astounding, sitting there and being mesmerized by it. And when you realize that he was grew up as a Quaker, his work makes a lot of sense because he designed spaces specifically. And I think it would make a lot of sense too if he was even perhaps Buddhist, but uh, his work is designed to just provide an environment so you can step back and just enjoy it. Just not even enjoy isn't the right word, but you just lose yourself to the meditation and peacefulness in experiencing his work. And I thought this person did an excellent job talking about that and showing the different kinds of stuff that James Turrell does, all focusing around that same kind of relationship with light. So this is another really, really well done one. You guys are doing a great job with these. Okay, and then this is the last one we're going to look at today.
Hi, my name is Cami. I am doing my artist research PowerPoint presentation on artist Nick Cave. This is for 3D design, spring 2026. Nick Cave is an American sculptor, painter, dancer, performance artist, and professor. He grew up in Missouri as youngest of 7 brothers, but is Chicago-based currently. He trained at the American Dance Theater in the late 1970s and early 1980s, This comes into play with his work, as you'll see later in this presentation. He is also a professor at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. He teaches fashion, body, and garment, which you'll also see is used heavily in his work. Nick Cave is best known for his sound suits. He created the first sound suit in response to the beating of Rodney King by Los Angeles police officers in 1991. The suit is intended to cover a person's identity so you don't pay attention to race, gender, or class. I think creating art that is worn not just as fashion, but as contemporary art piece is interesting. You are forced to appreciate texture, color, and in this case especially, sound. I find a lot of the suits very playful. The bright colors and various objects make me feel a bit of childlike wonder. The suits are trying to distract you from the wearer underneath, and it's very successful in doing this. As the viewer, my eyes travel everywhere and want to consume everything. They also invite the viewer to touch and listen and explore in the round as you observe these suits. While my presentation doesn't provide audio of what the suits sound like, it's not really necessary. It's not hard to imagine the sounds they make just by looking at them. It is also important to note that Nick Cave has a background in dance when observing these suits, as mentioned earlier. He was very intentional with the way that they should move in the choreography and how that would affect the sound and visuals with the materials used. While these suits were created during a tumultuous time, they became a thing of expression and love. With the suit, it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. Because of my privilege, the prejudice and fear people like Nick Cave experience is something I'll never fully understand. But when it comes to not wanting to be put in a box and judged solely on what people see on the outside, I really relate to that. The suits are an important take on the lives of so many people. They were made to be worn by Nick Cave, but also models and dancers, allowing anyone to be able to wear it creates additional inclusivity. Nick Cave creates many commissions, but he was commissioned by Princeton University to create an art installation for their art museum. I love the amount of mixed media he uses in his work. In this case, the commission piece, he uses wood, glass, acrylic paint, and more. He used many different resources to bring it all together, which makes sense because it's a massive piece. It's about 40 feet high and 70 feet wide at the entrance of this museum. It also speaks to his inclusivity. He recognizes that to create something great, help is needed from all kinds of people everywhere. As the youngest of 7 boys, he didn't grow up financially wealthy, but he had a wealth of community and family around him. His mother was always present and supportive, while he had siblings and aunts he could observe in their own artistic creations, especially sewing. I appreciate that he can create something new out of almost nothing due to a short supply of resources, and this seems to be a skill developed due to his upbringing. His sound suits especially are a testament to that. He recycles fabrics, toys, and everyday objects to recreate art, and it doesn't detract from the art, but enhances the work. Some of Nick Cave's more recent works include amalgams and grafts. The amalgam sculptures were made to provide an alternative to public art that often misinterprets history, silences diverse voices, and applauds war. I appreciate Nick Cave's sense of community and using art to ask important questions and bring different groups of people together. Even in the way he builds pieces, he uses other sources and firms to compile them. He works with many different people, and he's not only an artist, but a composer, director, motivator, and everything you need to be to bring these pieces together. And these are my sites that I used for this presentation.
This is another really, really well done presentation. I really appreciate this. I like it quite a bit. Got to see quite a bit about who Nick Cave was, and I thought that was a lot of people, when they look at Nick Cave's work, they don't make a connection as to why they're called sound suits. But what I love about this presentation is that the person talked about how with Nick Cave's dance background and his choreography background, he designs these suits around people's movement so that they make specific sounds. And you look at these two suits right here, it's not going to be dramatic noises, it's not going to be loud sounds, they're going to be subtle. And I love that because it really draws you in. And they talked about some of the uh, reasons Nick Cave got started and why he does what he does. And what I like about that is Nick Cave is an example of somebody who they are expressing themselves, they're reacting to something, they are critiquing society. But you you look at this and you can enjoy the work that he produces, you can appreciate it and enjoy it without having to know what the story is behind each thing. It remains engaging and exciting for everybody to participate in. And I love that it is going to be different for every viewer. I think when you find out what the artist is saying, that adds a certain amount of depth to your experience. But his stuff is really positive. It feels to me more positive and healing rather than judgmental towards or against anybody. And I love that about his work. And this is something else that I found that the artists that you guys are picking, that you gravitate towards, are artists that really seem to have a positive, optimistic outlook. Yes, they are reacting to things that sometimes are very terrible. Some of the artists do, but they react in such a way that they're inviting you to help make a better future as opposed to wring your hands with despair regarding the past. And I love that about like Betty Saar and uh, Yinke Shonobara are artists like Nick Cave that do that same kind of thing, that build a stronger, better healing world. So I love it. Excellent work on this. So nicely done. Yeah, I wanted to share those with you because all of them were beautifully done. And I think you guys really do a wonderful job. We did want to share a little bit about um, the uh, the service projects. One of them is not going to be done until after spring break, so we'll talk about it probably next week, and we'll go over the additional um, PowerPoints that are turned in at that time as well. But between now and then, one of the service projects that somebody did, this is part of the service learning thing, alternative to the artist research. This individual, when we first started talking about it, the initial thing that they suggested, I thought, well, that sounds kind of weird. And then they did a really good job explaining what it was, and then it makes sense. Why would you do that? One of the things that we do as artists is, yes, we're responding to society around us, and we're creating an environment so people can explore the society around us through our thoughts about that society. But something else we do as artists is create things that last. They become everything from memories to monuments and everything in between. And what this individual did is this artist's background, and when you watch this, whoever this artist is, let me know if I can use your name, and I'll talk about it again next time. But this individual used their, I believe it was a graphic design, 2D design background, and made a memory book for the family. And bookbinding and book building is a traditional art form, but they use their expertise at translating people's communication into something that is tangible as an artist. And we're able to coordinate with an extensive family and put together something that becomes a testament to the impact of the life of an individual in this family. And I thought that was a really beautiful project. The only downside to something like that is they wanted to get it right. And because, they were part of this family that was doing it, they wanted to make sure it was right. And the downside was they spent a lot more time on it than I'm hoping anybody else does. Um, and I wanted to give them credit for that. They spent over 90 hours on this project this semester when all told, the cap was supposed to be 20. And it doesn't sound like it was scope creep. It sounded more like it was that this individual wanted to make sure that everything was done correctly, because this was a testament to the individual's life and their impact on everybody. Collecting stories, images, everything about, recording their impact on the family, people's recollections about what that impact meant to them specifically, assembling that so that it was in a solid, good, and pleasing format, and then creating a book from it, designing and laying out the whole book. It was an extensive process, and I think it's um, a very original idea for the service learning project. So when that individual watches this recording, please email me and let me know, and whether I can share your name. And the only reason I'm asking that is because it seemed like it was a very personal thing. You guys have done an absolutely wonderful uh, job on these artist PowerPoints. And what I would recommend to everybody is when you go and look at this week's recording, look at the different headings in the YouTube channel, and look for those PowerPoints for 1130 section X01 for spring of 2026, and you'll see everybody's in that. Um, I'm sorry, what is it called? Playlist, in that playlist. That's it. It's a total brain block there. So and I'm really impressed with the level of work that you guys are turning out this semester. Um, I I wish we were able to connect more in person, at least virtually in person, because I love the interaction with you guys. Uh, it looks like I still need to send the images in a PDF for this most recent quiz. If you haven't taken the quiz yet, I will send that out tonight and get that to everybody so that you see all those images. And I noticed that yesterday the images were showing up, today they aren't. So that's a little bit problematic, but it does look like each of those images, even if they aren't showing up, it tells you what they are. And a couple people were able to take the quiz without seeing the images because of that information. But tonight I will still put together a PDF with all that together so you guys have it. All right. But thank you so much for watching this, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your spring break. And if anybody has, oh no, I was going to talk about I'm sorry, I was going to talk about the rest of the semester. So I'll talk about that really quickly. The rest of our term together, we have two more project uh, modules to do, and we have a couple revisits. And the revisits is next project module is going to be on texture and light. We're going to talk about that next week. What you're going to be doing there is, and people have asked me, that one's a little bit problematic because people have asked me about it. You're making 12 tiles, 6 of them are with color collages and 6 of them are with texture collages. And you need to spend at least 45 minutes on each of those tiles. And believe it or not, and as you can see with the classes that you guys have experienced yourselves, you've seen that this is exactly true. If you don't spend the time on it, it shows. And if you do spend the time on it, it shows. But that's 45 minutes each for 12 tiles is going to be at least 9 hours that you're working on these tiles. And I want you to do that because when you spend the time, you start doing things that you wouldn't if you were just trying to get it done. And we will talk about more about that next week. If they're supposed to be due before we talk about it, don't do it. Like I've said, the due dates are all flexible. And so we are going to be talking about it next week. Then after that, we're going to be returning to these foam carvings and doing the paper mache. And we will talk through that, and you'll have an opportunity to do that. But the reason, excuse me, why we're waiting a little bit before doing the paper mache is so that if you need to sand parts down or change your sculpture at all, you have the time to do that before doing the paper mache. If I do require that you or that you make some changes in your sculpture, do that before doing the paper mache because it becomes problematic afterwards. And then after that, we are doing a module on contemporary processes and conceptualism. We're going to be doing two different things. One is we're going to be making cocoons or cocooning an object rather. And the other is we're going to be building conceptual art. And that is something that, again, we will talk about next week. And then after that, your final project that we're going to be doing is the Mighty Voltron Sculpture Revisit, which is basically, Voltron is a bunch of little robots come together to make a mega robot. What we're going to be doing is you take your foam carving that you cover with paper mache, apply texture to it and color to it. The color and texture, you learned about that during the color and tile module, which is the next one. And you can also use remnants of other projects that you've already finished and documented throughout the term. So that's something to look forward to. Then two more things that I need to talk about is to remember. Let me show this to you really quick. Applying the tools of artistic critique. What you're going to be needing to do is apply these to comments, discussion comments, and assignments that are coming up. And we also need to do artistic critiques of your own work and someone else's work. And this is why we have these discussions so everybody can see everybody else's work. You're going to put a picture on screen of your work and go through and critique it in about 3 to 5 minutes using the 4 tools of artistic critique. Describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And you're going to do that pretending it's the first time you've ever seen it. Pretending that you've never seen it before, pretending that you don't know how you made it. So that, and again, 3 to 5 minutes. Artistic critique somebody else's work. You're going to go through all the discussion posts, find one work that has been done throughout the semester that you like from somebody else, and then do a critique on that work. Doing the same thing, describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And it's going to be 3 to 5 minute videos. That's what both of these are. Now, if you don't feel comfortable being on screen, that's fine, because what you're going to be doing is recording your voice talking, or recording you talking about this while we see a static image of the sculpture. I don't want you holding it in your hands or anything. You can just show a screenshot or do a screen share with an image of the work in the discussion board. And then it doesn't even have to be your voice. You can write this out, time it for 3 to 5 minutes, and then have one of your roommates or somebody else read it and record them talking about the artwork, where we're just seeing the artwork static on the screen. Or several people have put that into an AI program where the AI has read the words and then spoken it. Sometimes that works out really good, and other times it works out even better. You can find like Professor X reading it, online. You can find an AI that does that. Or I've also had one person did it with Elmer Fudd, Elmer Fudd's voice doing the critique, where you write it out beforehand, make sure that the time is right as you read it, and then use the recording of somebody else's voice instead. So you do not have to appear in the screen in either of those. And I should also say, if you haven't done the PowerPoint yet, it does not have to be your voice. You can write everything out. Remember, it has to be about that same length of time, 5 to 7 minutes or so. You write it out, make sure that the time is correct, and then have somebody else or AI read it and go through, record, make a video going through the PowerPoint slides with that other voice in the background. And that's totally fine. You do not have to appear on it ever. So that is something that I wanted to remind people about. And then also, if we look here, you notice that none of these have been posted yet. You guys will, in about a month and a half, get links for the student SRI. This is a good opportunity to get extra credit because you get a percentage boost in your grade when you do the student SRI. Now, last semester, um, several people did take advantage of the extra credit things that are available, but I found that the people that ended up getting the best score were people that went through their Canvas, saw the assignments that they hadn't turned in, turned those in, saw the assignments that they didn't get scores on that they wanted, and went and made sure that they resubmitted those, and then just went through and tweaked things until and resubmitted until they got the points up to where they wanted them. If you don't watch these videos, you don't get your attendance points. That will take off a full letter grade right there. So make sure that you are doing that. And I should also let you know too that our final will be online. It'll be something that you can write and then submit, and it will be available for the entire finals week. And so you can take it from anywhere in the world as long as you have access to being online. If you are going to be doing something where you won't have access to the internet during finals week, we have to make other arrangements. But if you don't turn in the final, then according to department mandate, you will lose a full letter grade in the class, which that has not happened very often at all. Because the students at UVU that I've worked with, you guys are consistently very professional, and I really appreciate that. But thank you very much for joining me, and I doubt anybody's gonna watch this until the weekend, and that's totally fine. Enjoy your spring break, but it is you will get points for doing the attendance. And again, for the attendance for this week, you will be watching the Allegory of the Cave by Plato, and I'll put a link to that in the attendance box for this week. And you'll be responding with one thing that you learned from the Plato's Allegory of the Cave video, and the rest of the things will be 4 things that you learned watching this video. All right, thank you so much for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your spring break. Have fun, and I will see you on Wednesday.